The war years, the period from 1941 to 1945. World War II was a very tumultuous time in world history. Both hemispheres of the globe were involved in a war that spanned across 2 continents. The Second World War was the first and only war of its scale. Over 60 countries were involved in World War II, resulting in countries that gained exponential success and wealth because of the scale of the war. The United States was one of the countries that emerged as a superpower at the end of the war. The attack on Pearl Harbor, D-Day, and the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were 3 wartime events in the early 1940s that helped the United States turn into a world superpower. The attack on Pearl Harbor was influential in turning the U.S. into a world superpower because it brought the U.S. into World War II. The attack on the U.S. naval base located in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, was a Japanese attack designed to keep the U.S. from entering World War II by destroying the majority of their naval fleet. The attack commenced at approximately 8 a.m. on December 7, 1941. Japanese fighter pilots dropped torpedoes onto the strength of the American naval fleet that was stationed at the base, killing over 2,000 people and damaging many battleships. The attack was designed to keep the United States from entering the war, however it had the opposite effect. In a speech given by Franklin D. Roosevelt on December 8, 1941, President Roosevelt proclaimed that, since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire. The attack on Pearl Harbor drew the United States into military action against Japan. This attack began to build the U.S. into a world superpower because it brought the U.S. into the war it would eventually win. Even though the attack was successful, the attack on Pearl Harbor did not have the effect on the United States that Japan intended. The landings at Normandy Beach in 1944, also known as D-Day, were influential in turning the United States into a world superpower because the attacks were led by Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was an American general and eventual president. In 1944, over 150,000 Allied troops stormed 5 different beach locations along the coast of Normandy, France. The invasion was one of the largest amphibious invasions in the world, and for many signified the end of German occupation in Europe. The invasion involved Allied troops, however the majority of the troops deployed in the beach assault were American. Over 73,000 American troops were deployed along with the other troops, all under the control of American General Dwight D. Eisenhower. This series of invasions helped to transform the U.S. into a superpower because the leadership and most of the planning of the operation was American, and it gave the American military the frontal role in organizing Allied troops, and the entire Allied alliance soon looked to the U.S. for guidance and support, giving the U.S. a valuable position that would serve them well later in the war. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were influential in turning the U.S. into a world superpower because they ended the war in Japan by a U.S. display of power. In 1945, the war in the Pacific Theater was coming to a head, and American troops were hungry for the end of the war. In the United States, a secret committee of top scientists called the Manhattan Project was charged with designing a weapon that would finally bring about the end of the war in Japan. The weapon that was produced was the atomic bomb. On August 6, 1945, President Harry S. Truman gave the go-ahead for a B-29 bomber to drop the first of 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima, destroying the entire city. After Japan did not surrender, a second bomb was dropped on the city of Nagasaki, once again destroying the city. These bombs helped transform the U.S. into a world superpower because in 2 bombs, the U.S. ended the entire war that had been waging for the greater part of 7 years. Showing the full strength of their power brought along respect from other countries, and the United States quickly was transformed into one of the most powerful countries in the world. At the end of the war, the United States, along with the Soviet Union, was one of the most powerful countries in the world and experienced a tremendous period of economic growth and prosperity that would last the U.S. until the Cold War, all because of the wartime events that occurred in the early 1940s.